So after the release of the final episode of The Day I Became a God, Jun Maeda, the writer of this show, locked his Twitter account, and if you look at some of the interviews that happened in Japan, like, the staff and stuff, like, pretty much said he disappeared, which is kind of disappointing that even if you dislike something, that we live in such a polarizing time where people can send death threats and just horrifying messages because they have this kind of shield online that protects them, that you can go that far. While it's always fine to dislike or like things and it goes against the mass opinion, just like the level of hate that gets thrown someone's way because something didn't end the way you wanted is just disappointing to me. And while some people may say, oh, what's this have to do with the review? I think it's important because honestly, I'm probably going to have an unpopular opinion about this ending. And I feel like, there's going to be a lot of stuff thrown towards me for saying things that people may not agree with. Just be nice and respectful when you're discussing things with people. It's a disappointing time we live in when, creators have to lock themselves away because they're, like, getting death threats because people didn't like their show. The Day I Became a God was not a very popular show. A lot of people thought it was one of Jun Maeda's weaker works even before this episode released. A lot of people said it got worse in the second half. I personally liked the second half, and all the way through 1 through 11, I really enjoyed it. And people, I guess, spoiled me. I'm not really sure. Somehow I avoided everything for Jujutsu Kaisen, no issues. Day I Became a God, people were commenting on, like, episode 8's review, like, just spoiling there's a happy ending, this and that. A lot of people just having no thought process on, like, hey, commenting stuff on prior reviews. So I walked into this thinking Hina was going to be back to normal, skipping down memory lane, Frenching Yoda by the looks of the comments, but honestly, I wouldn't claim this as a happy ending. It's happier than I thought it was going to be, don't get me wrong, but I don't think this is what you would call a happy ending. It's not like she goes back to who she was. It's not like she gets to be a normal girl like she once was. There's a optimistic nature that maybe in the future Yoda will be able to be a researcher that will be able to properly cure her, but there's no guarantee. There's a very strong, and I would argue the more logical side says, that maybe in a year's time, maybe less, a little bit more, she might die. There's a good chance of that with the disease she has. But at the very least, she gets to spend those days, that however many there are, with Yoda and her family. Personally, if you were to ask me, what would I change about the ending? There's a moment when they're all sitting on the couch and they're watching the film play, where I think it's the perfect opportunity to kill Hina and then see her goodbye message in the film. Personally for me, I like those sad endings. I like those ones with the good punch to just wrap it all up. But her living, it's not the worst thing ever in my opinion. This is a show that a lot of people criticize for having no build-up or emotional payoff. I think it does. I still personally stand by saying this is my favorite work of Jun Maeda's. I'm not the biggest fan of his in the sense that, like, his works are in my favorite anime list. I do enjoy all of his works to some degree, but this was the one that clicked the most for me. And even though this ending wasn't what I wanted, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. I honestly walked into this episode thinking it was going to be absolute shit, or it was going to be the most happy-go-lucky ending that I've ever seen. That's what I kept getting comments on. Christmas, it obviously caused delays for a couple of the videos, Jujutsu Kaisen as well as The Day I Became a God, because it's the holiday season, right? So I was waiting till Monday to do it. And the amount of people who kept shoving it down my throat saying that this was so happy, that there was this relationship between Hina and Yoda, or that it was just the worst ending, honestly, it just skewed my perception of what I thought was going to happen. And honestly, I'm fine with the ending. Would I rate this off as being what I wanted? No, I'd say it's bittersweet in a sense that I think it works, but in the other sense, I think there was a lot of room to really end it in a painful way that was satisfactory. But I do also look at what he accomplished with this ending, and I do feel like he did something different. One of the biggest things that I actually kind of enjoy that I never thought I would say is there technically is a relationship between Hina and Yoda, but not a sexual or like romantic one. It's more of an emotional one. The idea of his love interest is something that I think all of us wanted to see fully committed because she had the best episode, the one dedicated to her mom and dad. Most emotional episode, best directed, everything about it was phenomenal. I think most people watching the show agree that her episode was the best. But the thing is instead of committing to that, they brush it aside and say, you know what? Yoda's grown past just being a horny teenage boy who wants to be with a crush. The thing that he wants to dedicate his life to is Hina and finding her a cure and giving her a happy life. And rather than going the sexual romantic route, which would have been pretty creepy all things considered, since she can't really even form complete sentences and she's pretty much helpless she really can't help herself. She's essentially helpless with her own life. the idea of this isn't something that I feel is any sort of romantic chemistry. It's completely this like symbiotic relationship where they both need the other and they want to enjoy their life together. And you can almost argue it's a father-daughter, a brother-sister. It doesn't really feel romantic in the slightest. It feels like this emotional bond that goes past what most relationships could be viewed as. So in doing so, Junmaida actually was able to accomplish a relationship that I think is actually fairly conclusive and I would argue satisfying. That's the one thing I think is satisfying about his ending, is that rather than going with the traditional killing off the character, he ends up with his love interest. We've seen that so many times. Instead, he went with the direction of there's a chance. There's a slim chance that maybe in the future she could be cured. Or maybe she'll live a very long, happy life as she is, or maybe she'll die in a year's time. Maybe what happened to Hina's father will happen to Yoda and you'll have to say goodbye. But at the very least, she's with them now, and this is what they all want. Like, the slightest impression that this was supposed to be perceived as a very romantic relationship, it was definitely an emotional one. And I think that's what makes it satisfying in a certain sense. It's not what I was hoping for, it's not what I expected, but I wouldn't call it a happy ending in the slightest. And I guess maybe sad is something that's up to interpretation. This was claimed to be Junmaida's saddest work to date, which I personally disagree with his thought process there. I don't think he was trolling. I personally think this is sad to him and this was his saddest. And I think depending on how you look at Hina's life and what she's living, that could be perceived as quite a sad life, but she seemingly is happy. And I think there was a good build up to that. I think the idea with the cards and her always swatting away Yoda's because Yoda was already there and once he was starting to leave, she didn't have the card. I thought that was a great way to kind of indicate what was happening. And honestly, I feel like I'm just gonna get attacked for not even just shitting on this. I really feel that way, and that's disappointing that I can't even come up to my own reviews being like, hey, you know, I thought this was fine. It's not the best thing ever, but it didn't ruin the show for me. And then I feel like, oh, I'm gonna be like Junmaida, I'm gonna have to lock down the Twitter account because people are just gonna attack me. But it's like, this show, it's very weird to me because this was already not even close to being that popular of an anime, and a lot of people thought it was shit for a long time. So I'm wondering if the reason why there seemingly is so much backlash is because it already had a smaller following to begin with. So the people who did like it up until this point are more vocal about it than if it was like, say, I don't know, a mainstream show that had an ending like this, you would still see a decent amount of praise for it. And I think overall it was a fine ending. It was bittersweet in a sense, but I would never call it happy or something like that. It felt more conclusive in a unique sense, but it doesn't feel like there's gonna be a great stopping point for these characters. The horrible side of me says, you know, in a year's time, Hina's not going to be alive. Maybe that's not what Junmaida envisions in his own headcanon. For me personally, I don't think there will be a cure. I think she will have a relapse, and I don't think she'll make it out alive. But I do like the idea of her being able to spend more days with these people before she reaches that end. Overall, I don't regret my time watching The Day I Became a God. I thought it was hilarious, I thought it had good drama, and for me personally, I don't think things are left unconclusive. And I honestly wouldn't say I needed more episodes to flesh anything out. I liked how he tied everything up, even though it wasn't what I was expecting or personally wanted. I'm not the one writing the show. I'm here to experience a different author's work. If everything fell down to exactly how I wanted it to go, then there's no point in me watching other people's works if everything's happening the way I want it. That's going to be an unpopular opinion. I'm sure this will be a very polarizing review, or maybe it won't be. You know, maybe people who watch these reviews are, you know, not the same people who are threatening to kill Junmaida on Twitter. Overall, it was okay. It was fine. It wasn't the best thing ever, but it was far from the worst thing ever either. And I do appreciate an author who's willing to take some risks, and I can honestly say this one did so. Let me know your thoughts and feelings on the last episode of Day I Became a God. Did you enjoy it, or did you completely hate it like many people online? Whatever you're feeling, if you're respectful, let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, share your support, and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.